that's like, to be the second worst singer in the world. That's not many that can claim that, but, I can.
Hello, and welcome to another new episode of Live Through That. I'm your host, Mike Hipple, and on this podcast, we'll dig a little deeper into a pivotal moment into the lives of some of my favorite artists from the 80s and 90s. This week, I'm pleased to bring you Einar Orn, straight from Reyjavik, Iceland. He is sometimes called Iceland's first punk and started several punk groups before eventually forming the Sugarcubes in 1986, with Einar sharing lead vocals with Bjork. Today, he tells me how he got turned on to punk music in the first place and how that kick started his musical journey.
So when I think about pivotal moments in my music life, I always go back to when I discovered a record by the pop group called Why. It's back in 1978. The lead up to that was basically that back in 1976, 77, I was literally the only one listening to punk music here in Reyjavik, Iceland. Well, there were a few of us, but not that many. I turned into punk when I got my father to buy for me a record in the UK, and he brought me back Peter Frampton, Staying Alive, or It's Alive, or something like that, and a 7-inch single with 4 tracks with the Buzzcocks, Spiral Scratch. And I put one side of Peter Frampton's record on, and then I put Spiral Scratch on, the 7-inch, and there was no turning back from me then. So I was listening to punk music, but being in Reykjavik at that time, it was quite difficult to get to hear the music. So I usually went out in a Sunbeam car, Vauxhall Sunbeam car, and tuned into John Peel and listened to him on BBC Radio 1. The Sunbeam car was the only radio which could reach BBC at the moment for some reason. So I was like just listening to John Peel and picked up from there like bands to listen to, bought the records in the UK, and they came some weeks later. And that, that's how I was just listening to punk music. Back in 1978, friends of mine were in in a record shop company, and they were importing records. So I got the privilege of coming into their warehouse when they were unloading shipments. And one day there was this strange looking record with the pop group and the band and the record called Why. And I thought I better try this out. So I put this record on, and it just blew my mind, because I heard there for the first time that music could be anything, and it opened up all kinds of areas for me to explore and dwell into.
The band The Pop Group was definitely not a pop band per se, and emerged around the same time as the punk scene in London was exploding. While they weren't really pop, they weren't really punk either. They were post-punk before that was even a term, and quietly influenced a new generation of bands. Singer Mark Stewart passed away in 2023.
I always go back to this record when I'm sort of dismayed over state of music, because it's still, this many decades later, still refreshing and brilliant. And yeah, that record just made my day, or has made my life, because from there on, even though I couldn't sing, I formed a band, and even though I still can't sing, I'm still making music. And just Mark Stewart's rest in peace voice was just brilliant. And just the total oral soundscape on that record was just amazing. And I still wear the t-shirts, which are like quite funny because they've got like political message, like we are all prostitutes with Margaret Thatcher on the front. And yeah, I just, if to name anything one, then this is the record for me. I was fortunate enough some years ago, they played here in Reyjavik, the pop group, and I met them. I went there with my partner and Curver and my son, and afterwards they just said that I had been like totally mesmerized and was like a little kid seeing something totally out of this world. And I got to meet Mark and the others, and it was like for me just brilliant to see them, and still just by seeing them play live here in Iceland, it all just made sense. They're just geniuses. There are other, of course, pivotal moments in the music. It's like now when I'm trying to remember this, because back in the day, I had to go by what the music press was writing, and so I always bought the music press like 2 weeks later when it turned up here in Iceland, and so I tried to stay like abreast of what was going on, and I still remember when I put "Feeding of the 5,000" by Crash, and that was like another mind-blowing experience to hear "Do They Owe Us a Living," and all of the songs on that record, the anarcho-punk attitude, direct political messages, and again, there was no turning back for me to hear that record, and I got to know Crash, and they just like yeah, again, made my day.
With all these musical influences in hand, it was time for Einar to start creating his own music, and in 1981 he did just that.
When I was at college with Bragi, we had this idea to form a band. There was a college night like of music, and we decided to form a band. And Frikki, who's also a old schoolmate, we've known each other since we were 12. And this is back in 1981, and we were at college and 18 years old. And we decided to form a band, and we got another friend in who was a bass player, but he knew how to play the drums, and we formed the band. I was just going to do noise and effects, and because Bragi played bass, Frikki guitar, and Ásgeir played drums, and so we set all the gear up, and then Ásgeir had a microphone, and he put the microphone into a guitar amp and handed the microphone to me and he just said, "Sing." And so I had to sing because I had the microphone. And so I got a bit of stick for being the shouty guy. But today it's more of a performance for me. And then back in the day, it was also a performance. It was, I started to write lyrics, and the lyrics. And that's also a pivotal moment in my life when Ásgeir handed me the microphone and said, "Sing." Because I had to use my voice. They were using their instruments. And so I started to use my given instrument, which is my voice. And I learned something about myself, that I could write lyrics about myself. And so my lyrics were about myself and my experience. And from that band was called Purrkur Pillnikk. And we just, took our life by storm. We released 2 LPs, one 10-track 7-inch, one 4-track 7-inch, and so we just went ahead. And in 18 months of our existence, we played 2 gigs every every week. And so we were just really busy with like a rocket up our bum, trying to, make sense of things. And we had fun.
The band toured Iceland and the UK with The Fall in 1982. They pretty much stopped after that, and they evolved into a series of other bands before gelling into the Sugarcubes around 1986. They went on to release the single Birthday, which became a worldwide hit, and released 3 albums before disbanding in 1992. I always thought of Einar as kind of like the Fred Schneider voice in the B-52s. Others weren't always as kind.
Yeah, I'm aware that my singing capabilities have annoyed a lot of people. And I don't care. I really don't care. And the comparison with Fred, wow, that is something like to be proud of. But I also got voted the second worst singer in the world after Ozzy Osbourne. He was number 1, and that's like to be the second worst singer in the world. That's not many that can claim that, but I can.
In 2010, Einar was elected to the Reyjavik City Council. I wanted to know more about that.
I did do a 4-year political stunt here in Reykjavik with the Best Party back in 2010. Then Jón Gnarr called me and said, do you want to run for the city of Reykjavik with him? And I said, yes, if I can be the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And he said, well, that's not the office we're running for. And I said, well, that's the office I'm going for then. So it's like we went into this with the Best Party, not knowing anything, but just trying to make sense of everything. And I think we did manage to dent sort of what public perception of politics should be, to make it more humane and admit that we didn't know things when we didn't know things. Instead of saying, I'll look into it, we said, I just don't know, but I'll find out. And so it was like 4 years. And I think it's good and healthy for everyone to go into politics and stop, because it's a valuable lesson. But I'm glad that I only got 4 years. And like I say, I got 4 years. What was the crime I'd done? It was a bit of pressure, but it was, I don't want to use the fun. It was interesting. I don't think I would run for a public office ever again. I think, I've done my stint, and others can have their go at it, because politics today is people's, if you go into politics, it's like, like a subscription thing, that people think that they should be there forever and ever and ever. And so I don't think that is the right model for anything. I was once traveling in the Faroe Islands, and a Danish politician said, what would your ideal state be? I said, where everybody was equal and everybody got what they wanted and got what they needed. And he said, that's a bit utopian of you. Well, that's what I want. And so I don't think that's anything wrong to have a utopia to sort of work for or aim for. But that's basically still my motto, is that everybody should get what they want. It's just a pity that the world is the way it is in. We're looking at not climate crisis, but just the total annihilation of the world. And if I was quite honest in my all my doings, I would just step back and let younger people take care, because we have truly fucked it up. And so how can we truly mend it when we've fucked it up? We're just too selfish to admit a disaster which we can't fix. It's somebody else who needs to fix it.
Einar has moved on to making art. He got a master's in fine arts degree back in 2018 and has exhibited his work worldwide.
After I moved away from politics, I put my attention to drawing and visual arts. and I did a master's degree in visual arts. And I've been practicing my art in that sense, visual art, ever since. And I combine it sometimes with oral soundscapes and space. And so I'm sort of, I've always done it. I find drawings since I was 22 years old, but I didn't realize that that might be my venue. So I've entered the venue of visual arts, and I quite enjoy being there.
I was curious about what inspired him to take the leap to go back to school.
I wanted to unplug, and I wanted to give myself some attention, and just to realize what I was about. So my research question was always from the beginning, why do I do what I do? And so I sort of backtracked my origins. And if I say that I started in with punk back in 1976, 77, I backtracked like the history of punk into situationism, into lettrism, into surrealism, into Dada, and I ended as a Dadaist. And my fellow students, they called me always a modernist. I'm basically old school. I'm the chap who doesn't use fax machines. I just make art, try to make up a new language. Yeah, at university, I was one of the oldest students there, but I don't think it's in many ways any relevant, because like I was, even though my experience time-wise was longer, I had like actual reference points in things which happened in the past, like the miners' strike in the UK in 1984, when I toured with Cook and Flocks of Pink Indians. And so I'm probably the last generation who could experience the avant-gardists of the 20th century, before fax came in. And now we've got the internet. So, and now everybody just uses the computer to get their experience. But our experience was actually a physical connection with the past.
These days, Einar is still creating music with Ghost Digital, and he's recently released some of his band's earlier punk records. He's also still creating art and has some exhibitions lined up in both the US and in Iceland. I've included a link to his website in the show notes where you can find out dates and such. And that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much to Einar for meeting with me and talking about some of this stuff. It truly was an honor. And a quick reminder that you can buy my book on 80s musicians and where they are today, 80s Redux, and its sequel, Live Through That, on 90s Artist, wherever you buy your books. And if you like this show, please leave a review where you're listening. It always helps others find us. And of course, subscribe so you'll know when the latest episode comes out. You can also follow me on Threads at Mike Hipple, Mikehi, P as in Peter, L-E, and Facebook at Mike Hipple Photo, all one word. Thanks for listening.